I didn't ask.
You have already asked. Let me show you.
No, I'm asking who is performing the task of HTTP handler and HTTP module here.
Let me show you. Let me show you what I have mentioned here.
Basically, this question
ASP.NET
is
Core doesn't have ASP.NET Core global.xs file, web config file, HTTP handlers and HTTP models. ASP.NET Core, this thing is not available. Whatever HTTP handler and model does, those are going to be done by the ASP.NET Core middleware components. We have already discussed this point.
okay. Life cycle.
So you have
Also,
to go through the documents.
we don't have life cycle here. .NET Core
Oh,
application.
there is no page life cycle. There is no page start, stop. All these things is not available here.
Okay.
Right. So please go through the documents because
Okay.
I don't want to waste time on those
No,
topics
that's
which we have
fine.
already discussed. Right.
Yesterday I joined late half an
Hello,
hour, so
sir.
I missed it.
Yes, this is not yesterday session. This is the first session, right? Monday session.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It is
Yeah.
working only in Windows.
Sorry.
It is working only in Windows IIS W.
Yes, yes, definitely. IIS only use in Windows operating system. This is the reason why it is in process. In process means it's your own process. You can only host in process. Whenever I'm saying in process means it is only IIS. IIS means it is only related to Windows operating system,
Okay, sir.
Okay.
right? So we have discussed what is ASP.NET Core module and what is IIS HTTP server. It is the Microsoft web server, right? Let us understand this in process hosting by taking some examples, and then I will explain what is custodial server, how out of process hosting is going to be work. Let me create one application. So how to create? First of all, you need to select ASP.NET Core empty. Then you need to provide the project name, location, what is the solution name you want. Then click on the next button. Which version of .NET Core you want? I want .NET 6. Do not use the top level statement. Let me uncheck this one, right? And click on the create button.
It will not
So
create any.
it will not create that top level statement. Top level statement means you can see now the program class without the main method and a class name. Whatever required, you can directly write the code. And you can create only one top level statement for application. You can't create multiple, right?
No name space, no classes here.
Sorry?
No name space, no classes here. No using statement.
Oh, nothing is there. Using statement is already included here. That class name, method name is already included, implicitly provided or implemented by the framework only. Don't think that no, they are available, but they are implicitly available, right? So inside the main method, you can see there is a method called create builder method, right? If you look at this create builder method, what exactly this create builder method does, right? The create builder method sets the web host which will host our application with the default pre-configured configuration. So set the web host means see by default it is created as a console application. So the point that you need to remember whenever you are saying the main method and the program class, all these things, you might be considering that this is the requirement or this is the entry point of a console application. Absolutely right. So ASP.NET Core Web Application initially start as a console application, right? That means that program class main method is going to be execute from the beginning only. So it is the entry point. And whenever the console application start, it will execute this particular line of statement. So what exactly this create builder method does? It is going to create the web host. So once it creates the web host and once it hosts our application and once it call this app.run method, that means what? That means your application, that console application will become a web application now. And where this web application is going to be hosted, that information will be provided, right? You need to configure that information and that information will be taken care by this create builder method. It will check what is the configuration, right? What environment is there, whether it is I need to use in process hosting or out of process hosting, whether I need to use in custodial server or IIS server. So based on those information, it will set the web host. So as part of web host, not only it will set the web server and host our application, but also it does other things. What are the things is done by the create builder method? It is setting up the web server. So what web server you need to use, what and then it is going to host the web application. Once it hosts the web application, right, then it will load the host and application configuration from various configuration files, right? For example, right, so sir, what are the various application configuration file from where it will load the information, right? So if you see there is app settings.json, app settings.development.json, launch settings.json. So there are multiple configuration files are there. From there, it will load the configuration informations, right? Then it will configure the logging services, right? Many more other services, right? So all these things are going to be done by the web builder, this create builder method. So if someone asks you what is the role and responsibility of a create builder method in ASP.NET core application, then you have to tell that the create builder method take the responsibility to set the web server, to host the web application, to load the host and application configuration from various configuration sources such as app settings.json, app settings.development.json, launch settings.json, right? Then it is going to configure some inbuilt middleware component like logging, like IIS service collections, and many more services. Clear, guys? What is the role and responsibility of create builder method? How it does the web hosting? Any question, guys?
No, sir.
Right now,
Actually, I am having a question.
yeah. So those people who said no, can you please explain me how it is set the web host or web server? How it will
From the launch setting,
how it is host the web application, from where you will get the information.
from the launch settings,
Sorry,
from
yes,
launch setting.
exactly, from the launch settings.json file it will get all the information, right? What environment I need to use. But second thing is there, it will not always check the launch settings.json file, right? If you are running your .NET application using .NET Core CLI, at that time it is going to ignore the launch setting.json file, right? So that all these things we need to understand. Yes, definitely it is going to check the launch setting.json file. From there it will identify what is the environment and what is the hosting model, what is the IP address, every information you will get from the launch setting.json file. Okay, that we will discuss in detail. Okay, next question someone asking.
Sir, are we going to create a web pool? And like in SP.NET, we were hosting application, creating the web pool and then websites under that.
So you are talking about web pool or application pool?
Application pool, right? In under application pool, we have multiple web
So
applications.
let us first discuss how to create the application. Then we will think about how to deploy the application. Definitely, I'm going to discuss all those things. What is app pool? How you can create the application inside app pool? How you can restart the application pool? How you can how you can stop the app pool? Right? How many application you should put inside one app pool? Everything I'm going to discuss. But I don't know why you guys are in a hurry. Already that are hosting and deployment is a different altogether. One chapter is there. Let's go step by step, right? As of now, we do not know how to create a web application, and if we are talking about how to deploy the web application, doesn't make any sense at all, right? So we need to go step by step. Whatever I am providing in my course syllabus, all the information definitely I'm going to cover, right? If you
Okay.
open the course syllabus, right, then you will see there is some chapter called hosting and deployment. Hosting and deployment. So why is that? This chapter
Okay.
means how I am going to host the application on premises, hosting and deployment. On premise means you can create your own server, IIS server, how you host and deploy, how you can host your application into Microsoft Azure. So all these things I am going to discuss 100%.
Okay.
right? So be patient. First, let's start developing without knowing how to develop, how to build, how to publish. And if we're talking about how to do the deployment, doesn't make any sense at all, right? Right. So, as part of the web hosting, as part of the create builder method, it does the several things. Now we need to
Hello, sir.
understand how. Yes.
So sorry for disturbing. Like setting up the server, web server means like what to launch IIS Express or another thing. Still you told that, no, sir.
Sorry. Can you repeat your question?
Setting up the web server means like in launch settings, we will define something like to launch IIS Express or to launch Kestrel server. That only, no, sir.
Exactly. Setting up the web server means whether you need to use SP, IIS Express or IIS or Kestrel or Nginx, right? What server you want to use that. And hosting means it is going to do in-process hosting or out-of-process hosting, right? That information you need to decide that this create builder method is going to decide, right? Whether in this case, whether we need to use only one server IIS or we will need to only use one server Kestrel, or whether I need to use both the server, right? If I'm using any one server or both server, right? Then whether I need to go for in-process hosting or out-of-process hosting, that information is going to be decided by these two pieces of statement, right? Then from a different configuration file, it is going to load the data. Then it is also going to configure some inbuilt services. These are the things done by the create builder method.
Yes, sir. So another thing is like we have like in program.cs, like the first method will be at executed, like you told like create builder dot web application dot create builder dot of args. Like what was that web application class and what are that args?
Sir, already we have discussed this is a static method, and this static method exactly does this thing, right? So we are creating the web host, right?
Yes, sir.
So
Like
here it
what
is
are the
now.
args we are passing or was passed or what is that web
So
application class?
already in yesterday session we have discussed this R. Did you attend yesterday session? Did you attend or not? You attend yesterday session or not? I'm asking.
Yes, sir, attended.
So guys, what is the use of this args argument?
Command line arguments to give from.
Right. So suppose you want to send some command line values to your application, right? Then in that case, this argument is going to be used. And I have also shown the example how to pass the command line argument values, right or wrong, guys?
Yes, sir, you showed us.
I
Yes.
also
So
told like
please,
in real time it is not
it is
useful.
not used in real time, but in your development server, if you want to pass some data, then that is going to be used. It is not used in real time at all. Right, for the development purpose, if you want to pass some data, right, you need to pass some data and then you can only use that. But in real time, there is no use, right? So suppose you are developing one console application. Have you ever used that main method argument, the string array? Right?
No.
So similar way. So this argument is never used, right? So we have already shown you. So how to pass the command line argument values, how it will receive, how you will paste the data, right? We have already discussed in our yesterday session. Please watch the session, and if still you have doubt, we are having separate doubt clearing session, right?
Can I ask one more question, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, can you go to the same program.cs file? Can I know how many times this program.cs file will get run? So at the initial time only it will get run, or
It is the startup only one time. Don't think that it is going to execute. But yes, whatever the middleware component we registered, right? Those are going to be as part of your request processing pipeline. Whenever the request comes, then they decide what are the component, how they are going to be executed. But this program.cs file, right? This is going to be executed only once.
but yesterday I seen that app.map get /100. So that is the second API API method.
That is the part of C. Whenever I'm saying, right, you have to know this is the services, right? But these are not services. These are your middleware components. They are configured into the request processing pipeline, and those components are going to be executed as many times you want as you can. Right? So you need to
Okay.
understand that. So as of now, I have not discussed the request processing pipeline. What is request processing pipeline? How the request processing pipeline is going to be executed? All these things we are going to be discussed in our coming sessions. Right?
Yeah, got it.
I have one question.
Yes.
Yeah. So here the main method is not present. So if we run the program, how will it know that we have to run this program.cs?
So this main method is not present. The program class is not present. Who is not providing these things? I am not providing, or the framework? Who is not providing? Who is not including these things? I'm not including, or the framework itself?
The framework.
Framework not including means framework know that this is the top level statement, and for one application you can create only one top level statement, and that top level statement means what? That if you have not mentioned any class name or any method name, then by default it is the main method of the program class only. That what the framework will assume. And you cannot create this type of code multiple times, right? You cannot create another class, right? So where you can only that class name and nothing is there. Clear?
Yeah, clear.
Right?
So it can only happen in program.cs.
See, here I'm getting compilation error or not?
Yes.
So why I'm getting? Because you cannot create multiple, what I can say, top level statement in your class.
Means we can't create like this also without main method.
No, yes, not without main method. You can create main method is only just like a method, right?
Yeah,
So
but
you,
here in class you are given just in x is equal to 10, just a declared variable, right?
right. So here also we are doing the same thing. This is the variable declaration. Here also you can write like this integer x equals to 10, but you will not get any error. Here you are
So-
not getting error, but here you are getting error. Why is this? Because by default, one top level statement is there that is going to be provided by framework, and that is nothing but your main method of the program class. But you cannot do the same thing multiple times. You cannot create this by your own.
If I want to implement any
You can't. Only one application can have only one top level statement. And in this case, I'm creating two top level statement, one program.cs, one other class.cs. That is not possible. If you create like this, then framework will only get confused now. Which one containing the main method? How the framework will identify? You assume that this is the main method. This program class assume that this is the main method. But how framework will assume whether the main method is there in the program class or in the class.cs class? This is the reason why they have restricted, right? You can only create one top level statement. You can't create multiple top level statements. Clear, guys?
Yes, clear.
Yes.
Right? Let me delete this one. Class.cs. Right? Okay. So let us understand what exactly create builder method does to configure and set up the web host. From a hosting point of view, ASP.NET Core web application can be hosted in two ways. One is in-process hosting. In the case of in-process hosting, which server is going to use, guys?
IIS.
IIS.
IIS. Right. IIS means it is only Windows, right? And what is out-of-process hosting? We'll discuss next, right? So how to configure in-process hosting in ASP.NET Core? See, by default, whenever we create any .NET Core application, the default hosting model is IIS in-process only. Why? Because in-process hosting gives you better performance, right? Comparing to IIS out-of-process hosting. Why it is giving you better performance? Because in this case, in the case of in-process hosting, only one web server is going to use, that is IIS, who is going to host the application, who is going to handle the application. But in the case of out of process hosting, there are two web server is going to use. One external web server, that can be your IIS, that can be your Nginx, that can be your Apache, right? And one internal web server, that is your custom web server. So whenever the client sends the request is going to be received by the external web server or the internet web facing web server, that is IIS or Apache, whatever it may be. Then once he processes the request, he then transfer the request to the internal web server, that is the custom web server, right? So as there is a transfer penalty, right? As there is the request is transferring from one server to another, so there is a performance penalty. This is the reason why in-process hosting gives you better performance. We'll discuss why it is giving you better performance again, right? Now, how to set the hosting as in-process hosting in ASP.NET Core. So it's very simple. What you just need to do, you just need to add this ASP.NET Core hosting model element to the application project file, right? So how to edit the application project file, guys? Tell me how to edit. So right click on your project, then you will see one option that is edit project file, right? So just click on this. So once you click on this, what you need to do, you have to use this ASP.NET Core hosting model element, right? And you need to set the
even double clicking also will help.
Yes. Double clicking also double clicking also it will open this window, right? So once you post this, then that means your application hosting model is now in process. This is using the code. Other option is there, using the graphical user interface. You can also set the hosting model. So what you need to do, right click here, go to the project properties window, right? Once you go to the properties window, go to the where we need to go, right?
In debug, I think.
Yes, it's debug. So once you go to the debug, there is an option called Open Debug Launch Profile UI, right? So you can see two types of a launch profile. IIS Express is for in-process, or you can say for IIS server. And this fast core web application, this launch profile is nothing but for your Kestrel web server. Currently, we are not talking about Kestrel web server. We are talking about IIS Express. So select this IIS Express launch profile, and then just go down, and then here you can see hosting model default is in process. We have already discussed, right? The default hosting model is in process, and even we have also set the same. And what are the other hosting model? You can use in process or you can use out of process, right? So here you can also select the in process hosting model like this, right? So there are two options using the first core hosting model, using the hosting model element you can set, and other option using the graphical user interface you can also set the hosting model. Clear, guys?
Sir, in the drop down, we are getting default in process and in process, right? What's the main
Right,
difference?
So what I told you, right? So when we create a new ASP.NET Core application, by default project file is created with what hosting model? What is the default hosting model?
In process.
This is the reason why he is showing in process, because whenever you create the application, by default, the hosting model is going to be in process. Why in process? Because it is going to give you better performance comparing to out of process hosting model. This is the reason why that default in process is selected, right? Clear?
Yes.
Right. So there is no difference between a default in process
Default
and in
process.
process. There is no difference. Meaning is going to be same. That is by default selected whenever you create the .NET 6 application. That's why it is showing default in process. You can also set in process and out of process as per your requirement. But there is no difference between them. Clear how to configure in process hosting model, guys?
Yes.
Right.
One
Now,
question.
yes.
In another launch profile, the default is Kestrel, right? So can we, so just in case asking, so can we also...
Currently, I'm not talking about Kestrel web server, right? I will discuss once this in-process hosting model is completed, then I will discuss what is Kestrel server, then I will discuss what is out-of-process hosting model. right? Anything related to in-process hosting model, if you have any doubt, then you can ask.
So yeah, can we also change that to in-process hosting, the another launch profile also? Is that feasible?
See, that is good. See, that is what I'm saying now. Why we're talking about custodial server launch profile. I'm going to discuss those things. How you can run using custodial server, how you can run application using IIS server, IIS with in-process hosting, IIS with out-of-process hosting, custodial with in-process hosting, custodial with out-of-process. So everything I'm going to discuss step by step. I don't know why you guys are in your. So forget about other launch profile, that is custodial server launch profile. Keep focus on the only this IIS Express launch profile, right? So don't think, assume that there is only one launch profile and that is your IIS Express, right? So this is, so forget about this fast core web application. So think that there is only one launch profile, that is IIS, and here you can use in process as well as out of process. So in this case, if I use in process, then what will happen? Only IIS will come into the picture and will execute your application code. If I use out of process hosting model, then what will happen? Now in this case, both IIS and custodial server will come into the picture, right? But currently I have not discussed anything about custodial server, so I'm not going to use out of process hosting model. Once I discuss what is custodial server, how custodial server is work, then I will discuss in-process IIS Express with in-process, IIS Express with out-of-process. I will discuss the fast core web application. This is nothing but here custodial server, only custodial server, how it can handle the request, custodial server along with IIS Express, how they can handle the request, right? Everything I'm going to discuss, but step by step, right? So let keep focus on this IIS Express with in-process hosting model. Everything in today's session only I'm going to discuss all those things, right? So what happens when we set the hosting model as in-process? So in the case of in-process, only IIS will come into the picture, right? That means what? That the IIS worker process is going to handle the application, right? In the case of in-process hosting, the application will run inside the IIS worker process, right? W3 WP is the worker process for IIS, and this IIS Express.exe, right, is the worker process for IIS Express. So if you are having questions, sir, what is IIS and what is IIS Express? The way we have already discussed Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is the light version of the Visual Studio, where you will not get all the features. Similarly, this is actual IIS is the actual server. IIS Express is the light version of this IIS Express, right? For production, you need to use IIS. For the development purpose, you can use IIS Express. By default, Visual Studio gives you the option to run your application using IIS Express only, right? So from the performance point of view, in-process hosting model delivers significantly higher request throughput than out-of-process hosting. Why we will discuss later part of this session. The process name that will be used to execute the application is W3 WP in the case of IIX. Similarly, the process name is going to be IIS Express if you are running your application using IIS Express. So don't confuse that there is any difference between IIS or IIS Express. Both are going to be Microsoft Internet Information Service Provider, right? It is the actual IIS server, right, which you can find in your machine. And this IIS Express, this is the development version of the IIS, right? In the development phase, if you want to host your application in IIS, then you can use this IIS Express, which is provided by default in Visual Studio, right? Now, how to use in-process hosting model to run your application? See, so what you need to do, you need to come to this launch profile. So once you click on this drop-down list, then here you can see IIS Express Fast Core Web Application and one WSL is there. WSL you can't use here. Why? Because in Windows machine, if you want to install, if you want to install Linux operating system and you want to start developing application using Linux, then in that case, this WCL is going to be used. But currently, WSL is not installed, right? You have to install Ubuntu or install Debian, right? For that purpose. So currently, we are not going to use WSL. Those who are developing or working on what I can say, in Linux using Ubuntu other operating system, they can use this one, right? But for our application, what we need to use? We need to use IIS Express. See here, fast core web application and here IIS Express. So you just need to select the IIS Express launch profile, and once you select this IIS Express launch profile, then it is nothing but your in-process hosting, right? So once you select this, right, then run the application. So currently, it is going to be used the IIS Express launch in process hosting, right? So in this case, what will happen? Now the IIS Express worker process is going to display the num. Currently, the hello world message what you are getting here, right? It is you are getting this message from this map get method. Now let me change this map get method implementation so that it will display the worker process name who is executing our application code. That worker process name I want to display, right? So for that purpose, what I'm using the system.diagnostics.process.get current process.process name. This will give you the executing worker process. What worker process is executing your application code? That worker process name I'm going to display on the browser, right? So now with these changes from the application, and if IIS Express server is executing, then the worker process is going to be IIS Express, and for IIS it is the W3WP, right? So currently you can see it is IIS Express worker process. Now even if you want to make sure that server is IIS Express, what you need to do? Just press the Control F5 and go to the network tab, make the request once more, open this the request, right? Go to the response header, and you can see Microsoft IIS 10.0. So this is the server who is currently hosting our application, and this is the worker process who is currently executing our application code. Clear, guys?
Sir, how can we use this? I mean, inspect.
Which one?
So the
This developer tool.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
inspect, right? It's called.
See, not inspect. So from your application, once you run this application, press Control F12, function F12, or simply F12, right? Some of the machine, F12 function key is not working, so you have to write function plus F12.
I mean, we can right click
Just
and
type F12. Just from your machine, just type F12 key, press the F12 key. This window will open. Go to the network tab. You can have different tab. Go to network tab, and then again issue the request, right? Here I'm just reloading the page. Once the page is reload, it will make a request to this particular server, right? Just click on this localhost, right? And then you will see what is the request URL, what is the request method, what status code it is receiving, right? And in the response header, you can see this is the server name, Microsoft IIS 10.0.
close this tab, sir. One second. Close this tab. I mean, enter tab. So just to click, right click.
This inspect is a different one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So,
I mean, they're the same.
Same, but I generally prefer to use F12. Who is going to right click? But why I'm saying, because if you see some of the some of the website, they are disabling this right click. Even though if you want, then you can develop the application where you can disable this right click button. If you disable the right click button, then how you will open the developer tools? For that purpose only, you need to use function call, right? But they
Yeah.
can't
So if you have
disable.
time and you can explain these things too in later sessions, please.
Right. So basically, so you might know some of the website they are disabling this right click. If they disable the right click, then how you can inspect? You can't inspect using this option. So for that purpose, you need to use F12. Clear, guys? Right. What is IIS Express? It is the lightweight self-contained version of IIS. It is optimized for web application development, right? The most important point that you need to remember is we use IIS Express only in the development, not in the production. In production, we need to use IIS. In our upcoming sessions, right, when we discuss the deployment and all these things, Right? At that time, I will show you how you can host your application into IIS. Why in-process hosting gives better performance than out-of-process hosting? So you have to tell, in the case of out-of-process hosting, there are two web servers. We will discuss practically all these things. An internal web server that is going to be Kestrel, and one external web server that can be IIS, Nginx, and Apache. The internal web server is called the Kestrel, and the external web server can be this. With in-process hosting model, there is only one web server, that is IIS, right? So in the case of in-process hosting, we do not have the performance penalty for navigating the request between the internal and external server. This is the reason why in-process hosting delivers significantly higher performance than the out-of-process hosting model. So before understanding out-of-process hosting model, we need to understand what is a Kestrel web server, right? Once you understand the Kestrel web server and once you understand the out-of-process hosting model, then you will get a better clarity, a better idea related to in-process hosting, out-of-process hosting, what is the difference between them, how they are working, how in-process hosting work, how out-of-process hosting work, whether I should go for in-process hosting, when do I need to go for out-of-process hosting. All these things you will be able to understand once we understand the Kestrel web server and out-of-process hosting model. The next topic what I'm going to discuss in today's session is Kestrel web server, right? So if you, I already gave you one idea, right? An internal web server Kestrel and external web server IIS, Nginx, and Apache. And these things will come into the picture when you are using out-of-process hosting model, right? Out-of-process hosting model means one internal web server and one external web server. Even though you can use only one server, right? But see, what are the difference? How you can use the Kestrel server as the internal as well as the external web server? All these things we are going to discuss. So first of all, let us discuss why Kestrel web server. As you already discussed, ASP.NET Core is a cross-platform framework. Cross-platform framework means what? Now you can develop and host your application across the operating system, and this is possible because of the Kestrel web server. This Kestrel web server makes the platform to be cross-platform, and this Kestrel web server allows the application to be hosted on Windows, Linux, and Mac. And this Kestrel server is not, you do not need to install it separately. It is implicitly provided by the .NET framework, right? The Kestrel is the cross-platform web server for ASP.NET Core web application. This means this server support all the platform and version, right? As I mentioned, IIS, only Windows operating system, right? But this Kestrel server, it is not specific to Windows operating system. It is a cross-platform web server. You can use on Windows, Linux, and Mac operating system. What by default it is included as an internal web server. Means what? It is included as an internal web server, but this is not completely true, right? It is by default it is internal. But if you want, then you can also make this as the external web server, right? So it is up to us whether we need to use this Kestrel web server as the internal web server or as the external web server. So if you make this as the external web server, then it is the server which is going to handle the incoming request. It is going to host the application. Is that possible? Yes, that is possible. Kestrel is the only server who can do all these things like the IIS Express. How that will see practically, right? So in the case of a Kestrel web server, the process name, right? As we discussed, in the case of IIS, the process worker process is going to be W3WP. In the case of IIS Express, the process name is going to be IIS Express. Similarly, in the case of a Kestrel web server, the process name is nothing but the project name. Whatever the name you given to your project, that name will become the process name in the case of a Kestrel web server, right? So as of now, we are using Visual Studio ASP.NET Core application. By default, Visual Studio uses, right, not by default, but you can see, we can see by default, if you use IIS Express, and by default, it uses the in-process hosting. Now, let us proceed and understand how to write application using Kestrel web server. But before that, what we need to do, we need to understand one file called the launch settings.json file. So we'll discuss this launch settings.json file in detail, but now I'm going to give you some idea about what this file, right? So once you open this launch settings.json file, and you will see this one. So actually we need to remove this part because we do not interested for WSL, right? So by default you will find this code. So here you can see one section is for IIS settings and another section is for profiles. Inside the profile you can see one is for Custodial Web Server. This section, whatever you can see, this profile is used for Custodial Server, and this section is for IIS Express. So what exactly it means? So this is nothing but your launch profile. If you are running your application, if you open this, one launch profile name is IIS Express, and this is the IIS Express launch profile. And another launch profile name is Fastcore Web Application. This is nothing but your project name. You can see on the right hand side what is the project name, Fastcore Web Application, and that name you can also find here. And this Fastcore Web Application, it is nothing but it is the launch profile for your custodial web server, right? So what exactly? Now, whenever you run the application, right, then in that case, the worker process name is going to be IIS Express. In this case, the worker project name, name equals to command name equals to project. This command name project means this is nothing but your project name. And in this case, what is your command name? Command name is IIS Express. That means this launch profile will use if you run your application using IIS Express, and this launch profile is going to be used if you run your application using Fastcore Web Application, right? And here you can see it is also setting the environment as a development. What is environment variable? We'll discuss in detail, right? And then you can see the application URL. This is important, right? So this is important. What it means? It means if you run your application using Coastal Web Server, right, then you can access the application using two protocols. One is HTTP, another one is HTTPS. If you are using HTTPS, then what is the port number? Port number is 7231. If you are using HTTP, then what is the port number? Port number is 5120. That means if you run the application using Coastal Web Server, then in the web browser, you can access the application using these two port number. So what about IIS Express? Right, for that purpose, you need to check this IIS settings, right? So if you are running your application using IIS Express, then in that case, it will make use of this IIS settings. And in IIS settings, you can see, so what is within that authentication, anonymous authentication? We'll discuss authentication in detail, right? For now, anonymous authentication means anyone can access, right? And here you can see what is the application URL for HTTP. You can access the application using 6557, and for SSL you can access the application using 44300. So now the launch profile is IIS Express. See, if launch profile is IIS Express, this profile is going to use, and for this profile the IIS settings is there. That means you can access the application using 6557 and 44300, right? Currently launch profile is IIS Express. Now let me run the application. Right, so what is the worker process name? It is showing IIS Express. And what is the port number? 44300. So now go and check. 44300 is the SSL port for IIS Express. Yes, sir. Can we access the application using this URL? 100% you can access. Come here and put down this and click on IIS Express. It is providing me the URL appropriately. It is using the log profile URL, whatever you shared for IIS Express. For HTTPS, the URL is like this, and for HTTP, what I can say, for HTTP, the URL is like this. Now how to use the Custodial Web Server, right? If you want to use the Custodial Web Server, then what you need to do, you just need to change the launch profile, right? Currently, the launch profile is IIS Express. Make it as a Fastcore Web Application. So once I make this as a Fastcore Web Application, then this becomes the launch profile, right? And this launch profile will be used to host and run your application. So this launch profile is for Custodial Web Server. So who is going to host your application? Custodial is going to host your application. Then what URL you can use to access the application? You can use these two URL to launch the to access the application. What is the URL? 72315120. Now run the application, right? So when you run this application, you need to observe two things, right? So first thing, The worker process name is nothing but your project name, right? Whatever the project name you have provided, that is coming as the name of the worker process. But before that, you need to understand one thing. This command prompt is open. Sir, what is this command prompt? So this command prompt is for Kestrel web server only. If you run the application using IIS, this command prompt will not come. But if you run the application using Kestrel web server, this command prompt is wrong. So what exactly this command prompt is doing here? Now this command prompt means Kestrel web server is hosting your application. Whenever the Kestrel web server hosts your application, this command prompt will come into the picture. And now once the Kestrel web server hosts your application, it is showing that how you can access your application. You can access your application using this URL 7231 using HTTPS protocol. You can access the application using this URL 5120. Right now, let me change this to 5120, right? Once I change this to 5120, click enter. See, again, you are able to access the application. Sir, can we change the port number? Yes, 100% you can change. How? Come to here. This one is used for what purpose? This section is for Kestrel web server. Right now, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add, right? I'm just going to add some value, right? I'm making this 171311512. So I'm just changing the port number. Now run the application. Right? Again, you are getting the output. Again, come to here. Now it is pointing to the newly port number or not? Yes. So, but the thing is that whatever port number you are provided, you will not get the application to be run on the same port number always. Why? Because if the port number is available, then you can only use that port number. If the port number is not available, then it will give you the warning or error that this port number is not available. Please use a different port number. So this is nothing but how you can use the Kestrel web server, right? So Kestrel web server means this
One
profile is
question.
for yes.
Can you go to LAN setting, that config file?
Yes.
So can we use here IIS setting port number same for?
Sorry, you want to use this one?
Yes. It will work for both or?
Let's check this one now. Practically.
Yes.
Right, it is working. Because why it is working? Because in this case only one is hosted, right? You
Yes,
are not
yes.
hosting this application using IIS Express. So it is no longer used.
Yes.
But if you create another application, right, and if you try to use those, what I can say, port number, then it will not work.
So one more question, sir. I have. For IIS Express, if I put out of process in the line number 18.
That is what I am going to discuss. Why you are worrying related to out of process?
No,
I
no,
have
no.
not discussed anything related to out of process hosting. What will happen if I put out of process hosting? That is what I am going to discuss in detail.
So it will take the IIS Express only, right, sir? Or
See, it doesn't matter. IIS Express, you can use IIS Express with the in-process hosting. You can use IIS Express with the out-of-process hosting, right? How? That is what I'm going to discuss.
no, in the
In-process
document.
hosting means, see, the point that you need to remember, in-process hosting means only IIS server, only one server who is going to access, host and host your application. If I make out-of-process hosting, then along with the IIS Express, Kestrel will come into the picture. How? That what I am going to discuss.
No, in the document mentioned for out of process, Apache, some server we mentioned, right?
Sorry?
In the document for out of process, we mentioned some of the servers like Apache, some two more servers.
That is what I'm saying now. If I make this out-of-process, so Apache, IIS or NGX, they are, you can use anyone plus Kestrel. That is what I have mentioned. I have not mentioned that you can't use this, what?
Only IIS Express.
IIS. So what I mentioned, you can use one external web server that can be IIS, NGX or Apache plus one internal server. That is what going to be Kestrel. You can change this Kestrel, but you can use any one of these.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
right?
I have one question.
Yes.
Yeah. In the launch settings, at line number 4, we have given command name is equal to project. But at line number 13, we have given command name is equal to IIS Express. Because we are
So this project,
given.
see, by default, this project is nothing but your project name. And
Yeah,
this
right.
IIS Express, it is nothing but your IIS Express server.
Right. So what I'm asking, the command name we have given project, by that only it will comes to know that it has to run as a test server, or because we have given at line number 10
this
to use.
is not that. So this is basically, this command name is only you have given project, but the thing is that this section will give you the information. This section is first core web application. This is nothing but your project name. This is the
Yeah.
reason why it is providing the project command name as project. But again, I'm not going to discuss this launch settings.json file in detail, because if you see launch setting.json file, one separate chapter where I'm going to discuss
Okay.
everything
Got
in
it.
detail. Currently,
Got it.
I'm just making you sure that how application is hosted, how the web host is set, right? What server it is going to use, what port number it is going to use, how the web framework uses those port number, right? All those things I'm currently explaining, right? So you have to remember in what will happen in case of in-process hosting, how custom web server is work, what section is for a custom web server, what section is for IIS Express, right? How it is able, how we are able to access the application using different port number, right? From where this port number informations are coming, right? What is the meaning of this SSL port, right? So these things I'm currently explaining. But coming to your point, launch settings is a different concept altogether, which
Chapter.
I'm going to discuss.
Yeah.
Right?
Different chapter.
So one question regarding ports.
Yes.
So these, how do we, I mean, like, how do we come to know that we need to specify only specific ports?
No. This port number based on your availability, right? In my machine, it is showing this port number. Whenever you develop the application on the development server, you will not get this port number. You might get a different port number. So based on the availability of the port number, automatically Visual Studio going to give. And these are only for the development purpose. In the production, you know what is the port number. You do not need to worry about the production. This is the development server only.
So can we define any number in the as a port, or is there any?
Currently, I have defined. If you remember, I just add some random one here and one here. It works. Why it works? Because these port number are available. Right? So if the port number, see, I have mentioned how you can change the port number. Currently, by default, this port number is there, right? So I have just put here 2 and here 3. Now let's run the application and see whether it is working or not. Right? Run the application. See, it is working and come to this. So what port number is available? 27231. Right? So these are available. This port number are available, so it will work.
So exactly what is this port, sir? Like we know the use of port, like to access the request. We make use of these ports to go and come the request from internet or internal server. But
No.
what exactly?
See, in every application, right, you have to understand. So have you ever done any deployment on the production? Because that is not the job of a developer. But have you ever accessed, suppose now you are accessing my application, right? So currently, if you are accessing, do you mention the port number in the browser or only the domain name?
Only the domain name.
But do you think that wherever it is installed, right, there is only the domain name, or they have also specified that this domain is for this particular port number? So the things are going to be decided in the host file in the server, right? There is a host file. Inside the host file, they have specified, right? Whenever the request comes for this domain, so this is the port number to be used. Right? Those are the advanced thing, or you can say these are going to be managed by the security team. But definitely, in our coming session, I will discuss the once you start the deployment, I will show you how you can make the deployment, how you can specify the port number, right? All these things are available, and we will discuss them.
I mean, is it security purpose? Maybe.
Obviously, it is the security purpose only. No one, right? You never access they are not going to expose what is the port number, right? All these things you can only access using the web browser, right? And whenever the request comes to their server, they will check this domain name, and for this domain name what port number is registered, and accordingly they will execute the application using that port number.
So every organization different port numbers, sir, or same?
Sorry.
Every organization they have different port numbers, or
No,
is
port
it
number.
same?
See, in my machine, it is saying this one. In your machine, you also might get this one. Port number is not important, right? Important is this local host, right? Here I'm using local host. Instead of a local host, you can use your machine IP address, right? And that IP address is going to be unique. Is going to be unique across the server, right? If you are having your own server, the IP address is going to be different. In my case, my server, the IP address is going to be different. Port number, in my case, whatever port number I am using, you can also use the same port number in your machine, that will work. But this IP address is going to be different. So generally what I mentioned, what in the beginning only, for 80 for HTTP protocol, we generally use the port number 80, and for HTTPS we generally use the port number 443 in the production server, right? But this instead of local host, what exactly you will find, the IP address of the machine, and that IP address, right, which mapped with the domain name, and that information you need to provide into the host file, right? There is a file called host file. So currently I can't show you that here. But in the production environment, there is a particular path. Inside that particular path, you will find the host file. In the host file, you have to provide the information. And anyone use the host file?
Yes, sir.
Guys?
I used that one.
Why you use? What is the response? What is the use?
Because okay, we need to map the domain name okay with this the port number. Any request will come to that particular port. Okay, it will redirect. Any request come to the domain, it will redirect to that particular port.
Exactly.
The application will communicate with the port number only. Yeah.
Right. So basically, from your browser, you are accessing the domain name only. And in your host file, you need to provide what is the domain name, and for this domain name, what port number is registered, right? And accordingly, it will use that port number to execute the application, right? Those who are working, they might know. But if you do not know, then it doesn't matter at all, because as a developer, you're never going to do all these things, right? Your responsibility is only to make the build ready, right? If you are using CI/CD, that is fine, right? Otherwise, you need to make the build ready, make the release note, whatever DLL, whatever changes you need to mention, put the things in the shared drive or whatever drive, right? And then the team, right, build team, they will take the responsibility to host all these things, right? And as a developer, right, even in my organization, even I do not know what exactly the IP address, right, of the production server. Right? It is very strictly, and it is security, from the security point of view. And as a developer, you will not get the production access, even though, right? So those, if you are working for a small company, right, then they will give you the access where you can log into the production server using that, what tool, what I can say,
RDP.
sorry,
Remote desktops.
remote desktop, right? RDC. Using this remote desktop, you will provide the port number, right? Once you provide the port number, then you will get the prompt where you need to provide your user ID and password. And once you provide the password, then you can connect to the server, and there you can see all. And in the server only, you need to open the host file, need to do all these things, right? But generally, as a developer, you will not get access to the production server. But if you are accessing, then please handle with care, because the production is production, right? Guys, clear, guys, this thing?
Yes, I have one question.
Yes.
For this in-process hosting, what is the difference between IIS Express and Kestrel Web Server?
right? So that is what I mentioned. So IIS Express or IIS, you can use only Windows, right? Can you use IIS Express or IIS on a Linux and a Mac operating system?
No.
Then this ASP.NET Core application is cross-platform, not from development point of view, but from hosting point of view. That means what? You can develop the application in Windows, Linux, and Mac. You can also host the application in Windows, Mac, and Linux. How you will host even the as IIS, you can't use IIS on Linux, you can't use IIS on Mac. Then how will you host your application into a Mac and a Linux operating system? Only because of this Kestrel web server. This Kestrel web server is the cross-platform web server, and this Kestrel web server allows to host your application on other operating system. Clear?
Yeah. So for Windows, we can choose any of them, right?
Even Windows also you can use Kestrel web server. It is that doesn't mean you can't use Kestrel in Windows. You can use Kestrel in Windows. You can use IIS in Windows, but you can't use IIS on the Linux and Mac. But you can use Kestrel in Windows, in Linux, in Mac as well. So currently, right, the way I have hosted the application, right, you can see in my machine, right, I'm using FastCore web application. If I'm using FastCore web application, in this case, who is going to host and run our application? Which launch profile is going to use?
Kestrel.
Right? Kestrel. If I am going to use IIS Express, then which launch profile is going to use?
IIS Express.
And in both the cases, the in-process hosting is going to be used. Right? For the Kestrel, you are using this. For the IIS, you are also using the same thing. Right?
It is the IIS
basically,
Express, that is a different port number.
Sorry?
If you
For
run in
Kestrel,
IIS Express, that is
Sorry, guys, one ask, yeah, one by one.
if you run in IIS Express, is it a different port number we'll use?
Yes, you can see for the Kestrel web server, the port number is different. For IIS, the port number is going to be different.
Okay, IIS settings belongs to IIS Express. Okay.
Yes. So you have to understand this. Next question, guys.
Sorry, that black screen is there, right? That is a command prompt of system or a Visual Studio?
Black screen is coming. My screen is not visible, guys.
No. Black screen
No,
means command
sir.
prompt.
Command
Yeah,
prompt.
you open command prompt, right?
Yes, this is automatically. If you are running your application using Kestrel web server, then you will get this screen. And this screen is basically meant to host the application on Kestrel web server. And whenever you host the application using Kestrel web server, this screen will come, right? For example, I'm closing this one, making this one FastCore web application, launch this profile. So once I launch this profile, you can see the black screen is coming, right? And it will, once the black screen is coming, then it will host and then it will listen to this port number. Now, if you press F12, right, make a request once more, open this one, then you will see the server that is what going to host and run your application is Kestrel.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Right? So this is
So
how
that is
you need.
execution page, sir. That is execution page.
Execution page means?
I mean, that is not command prompt, right? So when you
This
run
is
the
command prompt only. This is command prompt only. This is command prompt. This command prompt is auto used by what I can say. I will show you practically also this thing. This is command prompt to host the application, right? Next, next I am going to host the application using .NET Core CLI. So whenever I host the application using, or whenever I run the application using .NET Core CLI, at that time only it is going to use the Kestrel web server. I will show you this thing practically. This is command prompt only.
One more question. So for Windows, is there any performance difference between Kestrel web server and IIS web server?
There is no performance difference between Kestrel web server and IIS server. What is difference? Using IIS, you have additional layer of security, which you will not find in Kestrel web server, right? If you know IIS, if you have ever worked with IIS, right? If you type inet-mgr, which will open the IIS server, right? So you have many settings that authentication, authorization, handling, right? Filtering, those kind of things you will not find with a Custal web server. And this is the reason why we never used Custal web as the only web server to handle the request, because we do not have this additional layer of securities with Custal. Right? Custal means it is going to be used only as the internal web server. We are never used this as the external web server. In this case, we are using Custal as the external web server, but we never used this in the production environment. In production environment, Custal is going to be used as the internal web server, and the external can be IIS, can be your Nginx, can be your Apache, and anything.
But in production, IIS only for Windows, right? For other operating systems, we need to go for this Apache in Nginx.
Exactly, exactly. Apache, or you can say the other Nginx, right? But they can't learn to the things. In that case, you need to use this Custal server, because the Custal is the server who is going to execute your .NET code. Apache and that what Nginx, they are not able to execute your application code. Application code going to be executed either by IIS or by Custal, right? So for that purpose, what you need to do, you need to use an external web server, which can be anything. Internal web server, 100% it is going to be the Custal one.
Then this Apache Nginx, it will provide only external security.
Exactly, external security, and for your application execution, this internal web server is going to be used, and that is what we are going to discuss next. Right? So we have already discussed what is in-process hosting. You have to use this ASP.NET Core hosting model in the project properties file, or even you can also set the same using GUI. And we have discussed in the case of in-process hosting, the IIS is the only server who is going to host your application. ASP.NET Core model will receive the request. It will transfer the request to IIS. IIS will transfer by providing the additional layer of security, it will transfer the request to the application code. Application code in the sense, in this case, middleware component, right? And they will get all the information from where. Now, while transferring the request to the middleware component, he will transfer the HTTP context object, right? From the HTTP context object, it will get all the request information, right? What is the request type? What is the request body? What are the request headers, right? All the parameters, all the parameter value they will get from the HTTP context object, right? So now we need to understand what is out-of-process hosting, how it is exactly work. So for that purpose, what you need to do, you just need to use the out-of-process hosting, right? So what you need to just come to your application, right? And instead of in process, you need to make these changes. Even though if you want to do the changes, that is also possible, right? So build, debug, right? IIS Express, here you can see, you can also use a out of process hosting model, right? That is also possible. So both options are available. You can use, you can change this to out of process, and you can also do there. But the thing is that, right, what is out of process hosting model? In the case of ASP.NET Core, out of process hosting model, as we already discussed, two server will come into the picture. One is internal web server, which is nothing but your Kestrel web server, and one external web server that can be IIS, Apache, right, any Nginx, or any other web server. The most important point that you need to keep in mind is, right, depending on how you are running your application with out of process hosting model, the external server may or may not be used, right? How you are running your application, that basically decide whether we need to use the external web server or not, right? How? Let us understand, right? As you already discussed, Kestrel web server is a cross-platform web server that is already embedded with your ASP.NET Core application. So if you are using out-of-process hosting model to run your ASP.NET Core application, then Kestrel web server can be used on the following ways, right? Kestrel as the internet facing server, right? For example, if you run your application using this fast core web application, so in this case, Kestrel is the only web server who is going to run your application, right? In this case, there is no internal web server or no external web server, right? Kestrel is the only external web server who is going to handle everything. He is going to receive the request, he is going to process the request, and in this case, there is no additional web server, right? For example, if you understand this thing, right? If you are, when we use Kestrel web server as the internet web server, which will directly process the incoming request, in this scenario, Kestrel is used only, right? For example, this is the internet, right? And from this internet, this is the Kestrel web server. Kestrel web server receives the request, and Kestrel web server is going to execute the application code, right? And in this case, there is no ASP.NET Core module, no IIS, nothing is there. So in this case, Kestrel is the only web server which can handle, right? Whenever you run your application, right, using this launch profile fast core web application, or whenever you run the application using .NET Core CLI, then Kestrel is the only server that is going to be used to handle, right? To confirm this, what I need to do, let me first go to the properties window where my application is, right? So this is the location where the application is located now. So if you want to run the application using .NET Core CLI, so first of all, open the command prompt, right? So I'm opening the command prompt. So in which drive your application is hosted? My application is hosted in D drive. So let me go to the D drive, and which folder your application is there. Go to the folder, right? In my case, the folder is this one. Just copy the path, right? Paste it here. So once you have this path, then what you need to write? You just need to type .NET, and we have there is a command called run. This run command is going to run your application which is inside this location, right? Inside this D project fast core web application. So whatever project is there inside this particular location, that particular location is going to be run by the .NET Core CLI. For that purpose, what you need to do, just type .NET space, then run and press the enter button. See, build it starting. So once if everything is fine, so we are getting some error. The variable X is assigned, but its value is never used, right? That means we have done some kind of a blunder. Yes, here we have declared a variable which is never used. That's fine. We can ignore. That is a warning, not an compilation error. Then you can see, you can access the application using this particular URL or using this particular URL 72315120. Now, if you come to the launch setting.json file 72315120. So this profile setting is for Kestrel web server, and in this case, Kestrel is the only web server, right, who is going to access your application code. Now, come to here, execute this one. We are getting the output, right? Come to this part, select this one. Now run, and we are also getting the output as expected. So basically, in this case, Kestrel is the only web server who is going to host and not only host the application, but also going to execute your application code, right? Now, if you want to make sure that Kestrel is executing here, so what you need to do, just go to the network tab, right? And check what server is used, right? The server is Kestrel. So this is how you can use Kestrel as the internet facing web server. Clear how you can use Kestrel as the internet facing web server, guys? Clear?
So, sir, why there will be two ports in the application URL? Normally in .NET application, there used to be only one port, right?
See, two port means if you know, whenever we are creating the project, there is a checked box, right? Enable HTTPS.
Yes, yes.
Enable HTTPS, right? For example, if you open currently, suppose I'm going to develop a new application, right? So create a new project, right? So ASP.NET Core empty. This one ASP.NET Core empty. And this is, you can see, I'm just going to show you the example, right? And here you can see configure HTTPS. What I do, I just unchecked this one. Once I unchecked this one, click on the create button, right? Once I click on the create button, let me open the launch settings file. So now, how many URLs you are getting?
Only one URL.
Why you are getting only one URL? Because you have not enabled SSL, right? So once you enable SSL, means if you want to access using the HTTPS protocol, then you have to enable that, and once you enable that, then you will having both the port number. You can access the application using HTTP, even though you can also access the application using HTTPS. Later, once we progress, then I will show you how you can navigate the request from HTTP to HTTPS. For that purpose, we are provided with one endpoint routing, right? Redirect to HTTPS middleware component, which will redirect your HTTP URL to HTTPS URL, right? So basically, you can access using HTTP. Even you can also access the application using HTTPS protocol. Clear, guys? If you do not want, then you can remove any one of them. For example, I don't want to access the application using HTTP protocol, right? So what you didn't need to do, just remove this one. Control X, save this one, right? Now it is running, right? So let me run this application once more. Once you run this application, then you will see that now you are only having one protocol, HTTPS, no HTTPS protocol. Clear? Clear or not, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
But
Yes, sir.
in IIS
Yes, sir, it is
Express,
clear.
yeah, it is not
But
showing there is a HTTPS, right?
it is showing only HTTPS, not showing HTTP.
Yeah.
I'm executing only this one with the hardcore web
It is okay,
application
sir.
where I removed the HTTP protocol. So once I remove the HTTP protocol from the profile, right, custom web server profile, you can see that URL is not showing anymore.
I'm talking about IIS settings, sir.
So
Not
IIS setting, you can also do the same thing now. If you do not want to access using HTTPS, then what you need to do, you just need to make this as 0. Right? So once you make this as 0, now you cannot access the application using HTTPS protocol, right? Now let me do this one, IIS Express, and run the application. And you can only access now application using the HTTP protocol only, no HTTPS. See, this is nothing but you can see, if you copy this one, open this one on the notepad, right? Then you will see that this is the HTTP protocol, not the HTTPS. And you can't access using HTTPS. Clear, guys? Yes or no?
Pranay, hello.
Yes.
Yes, that is clear. Pranay, I have two questions. Okay. First one, okay, when you run by your Visual Studio, internet, the internet facing is IIS server, and external, internal facing web server is the Craster, and
See,
internet facing
currently,
is the IIS server. Yes.
let
Yeah.
me tell you one thing. In this case, right? In this case, whenever I use IIS Express, in this case, internet facing is going to be IIS, and the internal web server is going to be what I can say, Custral. That is what I'm going to discuss now. You guys asked me, I just to show you, but I have not discussed how it is going to work. Right? That is what. In this case, even if I am using IIS Express, right? Once you run the application, then you will show it is going to show me the profile name as what fast core web application. That means the custom web server. So custom web server means what? Now internally it is using the custom web server as the internal web server, and the external web server it is going to IIS. IIS will receive the request. IIS will transfer the request to the internal web server, which is in this case custom, and the custom web server is going to run the application. And this is possible because we have used the in-process hosting model. Out-of-process hosting model. If we change this to in-process hosting model, then you will see this launch profile, what I'm showing here, it is going to show me the IIS Express. Let's do this practically, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to the project, not this project. I'm just going to change the project file, right? Out of process to in process, right? I make this as in process. So as soon as I make this as in process, then you will see that the only web server who is going to handle the request is IIS, not the Custral, right? So in this case, it is going to show me the worker process name as IIS Express. So why it is showing me this one? Let's investigate. So what profile I have used? I have used IIS Express. So I have Express. Let me change this in the debug also. So debug launch profile for IIS Express. What I have provided out of process hosting model. We have to make this as an in process, right? Once you make this as an in process, then then you will see it is going to be used by the IIS Express server only, not the Kestrel web server. Right? So IIS Express. So if you use in process, it is going to be IIS Express. If I use out of process, then in that case, it is showing me what it is showing me ASP.NET Core Web Application, right? The Kestrel web server. The point that you need to remember is, right? This is how the internal extra web server working. And now I'm going to discuss Kestrel as the internal web server. Right?
Yeah,
So
friend,
for that,
one more last question.
yes.
When we are using this in process, it will be IIS will be used. When we are saying out process, then Kestrel and IIS will be used. Both of the servers will be used. But
if you
because this is
you are misleading, right? So let me before explaining, let me give you the idea, right? So just look at this image. This is nothing but your launch profile name. You can use project name. You can use IIS Express, IIS. This is the ASP.NET hosting model, right? If you are using the project name, so project name means in this case, what I can say, Fastcore web application. If you are using the project name, then what exactly it is going to do? It is going to ignore the ASP.NET hosting core model setting. If you are using the project name, then only Kestrel server is going to be used. That means Kestrel is the internet facing server, and the Kestrel is also going to execute your application code. So if you are using this Fastcore web application, then it doesn't matter whether you are using this in process or out of process. So in this case, only Kestrel is going to execute your application code. Clear?
Yeah,
that is
right.
out of process, right? So doesn't matter in process or out process. If you are using Kestrel as the if you are using project name as the launch profile, means Kestrel is the only web server. If you are using IIS Express, right? For example, I use the IIS Express. So whenever I'm using IIS Express, with IIS Express, if the in-process hosting model is in process, then in this case, only IIS is going to be used, and that IIS is going to handle the request and the response and going to host the application. Clear?
Yes.
These 2 points clear? Now,
Yes.
Now, instead of IIS, if you go with out of process hosting model, IIS with out of process hosting model, then in that case, what will happen? Two server will come into the picture. One internal server, which is going to be Kestrel, and one external server, which is going to be IIS Express. And whatever we do with IIS Express, this is going to be same for IIS. IIS in process, only IIS is going to execute the application code. IIS out process, Kestrel and IIS is going to execute the application code. Clear? Or
Yeah,
any
Pranay,
doubt?
one question actually, my question is not this. Actually, my question is when we are using out process, then there are two servers are used. One is Kestrel server and as well as IIS server.
No. See,
So
no. See, whenever you are using out of process, then you have to, then at that time, you have to decide what profile you are using. That decide whether I need to use one server or two server. If you are using the, what I can say, Kestrel web server profile, then it is going to use only one server, that is Kestrel. And if
right.
you are using IIS Express, then in that scenario only it is going to use two server.
Okay.
This is what I mentioned. First means if you are using the launch profile name as the project name, then hosting setting is ignored. Only one web server is going to be used. It doesn't matter whether you use in process or out process. Only Kestrel is going to use.
Yes. My question is when we are hosting in Linux server, in that case, there ideally two servers should work, like Apache and Kestrel combination should work to run our application in production server, right?
Right. So because if you are using Kestrel Linux, so in Linux this in process is not going to work now. In process means only IIS. If you are using Linux means this in process will not come into the picture.
Yes. In that case, my question is when we are doing that in the initial discussion, we said that when we are using only single server like IIS, we are using that application, our performance of the application is good. But when you are using two servers, then application of performance or application is not that good. It does mean that in Linux server, the performance is compromised in case of .NET Core compared to that of Windows, because there we are using only a single server.
Right. There is that performance bad in the sense, don't think that that bad, right? So even if you use Linux, you can only use Kestrel in that case also.
Okay, but the security is not that
in
good in
Linux,
Kestrel.
but security is not there.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want security, then you need to use Kestrel along with the Apache or NGX, right? In that case, you will definitely you are going to a little bit performance degradation, but don't think that much.
Okay, got it.
Understand? Any question from anyone? Any question from anyone? When and what server is going to use? What is internal web server? What is external web server? Right. Let me again. So this command name is nothing but your launch profile. So this launch profile, what I'm showing here, IIS Express and Fast Core Web Application, and this is nothing but your command name.
Command
And
name
if you come to here, this command name project, this command name IIS Express. This project is nothing but your whatever the project name you right? And this IIS Express is nothing but your IIS Express.
Yeah, IIS means we will be hosting the application in INET Manager.
Yes. IIS means it is INET Manager.
Okay.
Clear, guys?
Yes. So, sir, when we are hosting the application in Linux or any other operating system, so we are using only Kestrel server as an internal or external server. There is no role of IIS server or IIS Express.
We never used only Kestrel is the server to host our application because there is no security.
That means on a Linux platform, there is no security. Anyone can access the application.
You are misleading my point. I'm saying you have to use Kestrel. Definitely Kestrel will be come into the picture, but that will come as the internal web server. There should be some external web server like Apache, NGX, right? They will provide the security.
Oh, okay. So in place of IIS server, we can use Apache or WebLogic or NGS server on Linux.
Anything. Right?
Okay,
Anything you can use. But if you are using IIS, then you have the flexibility that if you want, you can ignore this Kestrel. IIS is itself can handle everything. He can provide the security. Then in that case, you can ignore this Kestrel one.
So IIS can play both the role here in the window in the case of Windows platform.
Yes, this is the reason why I'm saying that InProcess hosting will give you better performance as compared to out-of-process hosting, because in the case of InProcess hosting, right, this Kestrel will not come into the picture, but InProcess hosting can only possible with the IIS and Windows environment.
Okay.
But
Clear, guys?
you said IIS Express and IIS both are different, right? But
No, both are not
InProcess-
different. Both are not different. This IIS is the actual production server. In the production, you will not find this IIS Express. This IIS Express, they have provided only in the development, so that you will get the flavor that how IIS is going to be work. Right? This is only for the development, and this IIS, what I'm showing here, it is going to be used in the production. Right?
So
you can
it's
see
both are same.
both are going to be not same. Both are going to be same. Both are going only product of Microsoft only, right? This is the IIS server, right? Here you will not find IIS Express, right? Because it is the actual server, and this IIS Express, it is the lightweight version of this IIS, right? So the way you are working with the IIS, the same flavor you will get with the IIS Express, but only in the development.
I think it's performing same thing. That's why I asked.
Exactly, it is performing same thing, na? Because both are. This is the actual IIS, means it is the production, and this IIS Express you can use that only in the development phase. Both are going to work. The work functionality, it is going to be same, and you can also see the same thing is also here.
So in development, we can also use the IIS.
So
Not always.
in the deployment, you can't use the IIS. There is no option to use IIS. Yes, what you can do, you can host your application in the IIS, and from there you can access. Okay, you are talking about the application pool. Here you can create a pool. Right
Yes.
here, you need to host the application. While you are hosting the application, you need to decide which application pool is going to be used. All these things you have to do. You have to do here, and then you can access from your browser.
You can define the key here also.
Just one question. Can we change the command name? Like, can we add my own command name?
So you mean to project it to?
Yeah,
Right?
project or something.
Immediately I'm doing this, I'm getting this. Value must be one of the following values, right?
Okay, and what about the first core web application? Can I just name it first core web
Sorry?
application to something else?
This
Can I
one?
name the first? Yeah, this.
So you can change na. This is what I'm saying na. What are the possible values that what it is showing? I'm trying to change this to 2. And this hardcore web application, this is also fixed because whatever the name of your project, that is going to be used here.
So we cannot change it.
If you are going to change this, we need to change the project name as well.
If you change the project name, automatically it is going to be changed.
Oh.
Can you just put it 1 here in the first core web app? Can you just run it? Just see in the drop down whether it is coming here. It is coming. So you can run it. So I believe you can change it.
Right. So, but that doesn't make any sense now. Why you should put this one here? You only get confused. In this case, I'm having only one application, right? If you are having multiple applications, right, then it will make you confused. If you are putting the same name in each profile, then this will
And
make
just
you
one more
confused.
thing. One more thing. Like in the production, this launch setting or JSON setting will be used, or it is just for local, like local.
Which one? So
Launch
this launch,
settings.
launch settings will not be used in production. It is only in the development phase.
So we can't rename it, I think.
So in production, the actual server is there, na? Where we are hosting the domain name, where we are providing the IP address. Then in that case, what is the use of this launch settings?
So in production, how do we set whether it is in process or out process?
Sorry. So in the production only, you have to provide the server. So you are not understanding. In the production, you have to use either IIS, you have to use either Nginx, you have to use either in the Apache Tomcat, right? Anything. They are going to be the server to handle the things, right? It doesn't matter at that time whether it is in process or out of process.
So in production, all the options are available. It depends which one you want to use.
Yeah, there's no other. It is going to be decided there only, right? So you have to decide. So environment is there.
If we have multiple project here, so multiple profile will be created here in the same
Yes,
file.
for each project there is a launch settings.projection file.
Oh.
In production, it has to be obviously out of process, right, sir? Because we'll have to provide
Yeah.
additional security.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Right? But if you are using IIS, then in process it can be.
Yeah, got it.
Hi, sir. So
yes.
only so Kestrel is a mandatory for this cross-platform, but
Exactly.
in
Not
Windows we can
mandatory
ignore.
for Windows it is not mandatory, but for other platform, Kestrel is mandatory. And for other, you have you need to use that out of process. By default, it is going to be out of process only. Because the request will come that is going to be handled by the external web server. External web server will transfer that request to the internal web server, that is Kestrel.
So what is other platforms, sir?
Other platform in the sense Linux, Mac. Platform means operating system only.
Right.
Clear, guys?
Yes.
So now we need to understand why. So now you might be Kestrel API alone handling the request, and why we need a reverse proxy server, because for the additional layer of a configuration and a security. How the custom web server work? Let's see. See, this is the client or the internet or the browser from where you will send the request, and the request is going to be received by the server, right? So in the case of IIS, it is going to be IIS server. You can say this is the reverse proxy server. It is not mandatory to be IIS. This can be your Apache. This can be your Nginx, right? Any server, any external web server, they will first receive the request, and this external web server having this ASP.NET Core model, right? So once they receive the request, the ASP.NET Core model receives the request, right? Then they will transfer that request to the internal web server. That is nothing but your Kestrel web server. This Kestrel web server will then transfer the request to the appropriate request processing pipeline, that is to the middleware components. The middleware component will get all the information, right, from the context object. That means, guys, you need to remember, whenever the request is transmitting from this to this or this to this, in each layer, right, while they are transferring the request, means they are transferring the HTTP context object, which contains the information about the request, from where the we can access all the information, right? From this application, you will get what is the request name, what is the method name, what is the request parameter, what are the request body. Every information you will get from the context body, right? And then once it processes the request, it will transfer the response to the Kestrel web server. The Kestrel web server will transfer the response to the IIS or Apache or Tomcat, whatever, and they will transfer or they will return the response back to the actual client who initially made the response. So in this case, in the case of a out of process hosting, right, you will see this what I can say, two server. One is external and one is internal. The external server can be your IIS, Apache, any server. Internal, it is going to be Kestrel. But in the case of in-process hosting, only IIS is there. Clear, guys? And in our example, we are using this Kestrel to run the application. That is possible because it is the development phase. But in production, you have to use an external web server if you are trying to host your application on other server than Windows. Clear, guys?
Yes, clear. I have one more question.
Who is putting this line on the screen? Who is that guy putting this line on the screen?
Oh, I don't know, sir. I think how?
Which
I don't
Monica
know.
or something I see. Don't do this thing, right? Only keep concentrate on the screen board. Don't try to drag out drops or don't do any such kind of things. Okay. So any question from anyone, they can ask me now. So this is the
So,
point.
Yeah, I have one
for that
question. Can you go to the
Yes.
diagram, please?
Which diagram you want to?
Yeah, the reverse proxy. Yeah, this is the diagram. If I was using to deploy the application with a different server, so these reverse proxy things we have to set up, or it will be automatically set up by default?
So reverse proxy means you have to use the reverse proxy only. This is internally available Kestrel web server. You have to use this reverse proxy.
Okay, then I have to make some configuration like that. That is what I let's say I have using a Nginx server.
The way we are hosting our application into IIS, in the same way you can host your application into Apache, into Nginx, right? That is, and internally the Kestrel server is there. Request will be received by your reverse proxy server, and that reverse proxy server will transfer that request to Kestrel web server. You do not need to install this Kestrel web server additionally or explicitly.
Can
Okay.
you show me this in the live, sir? I mean, practically.
The practical I have shown you now. So practically, in this case, what I'm using, let me out of process. And whenever I host my application into IIS, in this case, IIS is going to run my application. So IIS will receive the request, but whenever the application code is executing, at that time, you will see that the server name, it is showing me the Kestrel. Why? Because it is the Kestrel web server who is handling the request. Right? Why it is
Yeah,
showing
I got
IIS?
it. Actually, my question was, when we are coming to the reverse proxy concept, so there will be two servers. One will be the external and one will be the internal. I can
You need to
configure
install
both.
only. You need to install only the external server. Internal server automatically available as you are using the ASP.NET application. This ASP.NET Core custom server automatically available.
Yeah, it is an inbuilt. But my question was, can we segregate based on different IP address or different domain names? Let's say
So
the
that is
internal will
what
be something.
internal is internal. You do not need to do anything. Whatever configuration, whatever IP address, whatever domain name mapping, you have to do with the reverse proxy server only.
Okay, got it.
Right? Yeah.
The one question: can we host other applications in IIS like Java application?
See, you can, but I never try. But why not? It's possible you can host, but I don't
Because
know. I'm not
since
sure
you,
because I'm
yeah,
not sure actually. I'm not sure. We need to check whether it is possible or not. But I hope as it's
because
a server, it's possible. I assume that it is possible, but I'm not sure.
yeah, I got this doubt because you said like we can the IIS is now outer host, so outer servers. That is why like when we say IIS, it is also a part of internal and also outer server. So
Oh, so that is not my question. Can you tell me? Can you use IIS on a Linux and Mac?
No.
Or you are talking IIS in Windows?
yeah, IIS in Windows we have as a server.
Definitely, it is the server on the Windows. If you are talking on the other point of view, if IIS is available on Linux, then that is a different story altogether. But IIS Windows means it is the inbuilt server of Windows, na? There you can deploy .NET application. There you can deploy Java application. There you can deploy PHP application. No, this is not a big deal at all because it's a web server. The problem is IIS is not available on a Linux operating system. The problem is IIS is not available on Mac operating system. So how we can deploy our .NET application on Linux and Mac as IIS is not available there. If IIS is available in all the different types of operating system, then why we need to go for this proxy server? Why we need to use this custom web server? IIS directly available. We will host our application there. No? You understood my point?
Yes.
Okay, so now the process is like if you're the diagram that you are showing is ASP.NET Core application. Now the Kestrel web server, if it is in place, then we're like it means that we are developing our application in Linux and hosting it in Windows. Is that the case? Like for example.
Developing is a different thing and hosting is a different thing. Why you are combining the two things? For development purpose, you can develop the application in Linux, Mac and Windows. You can host the application in Linux, Mac and Windows. So there is no link between the development and the hosting, right? So trying to understand my point. So development purpose, you can use any platform. Hosting purpose, you can use any platform. There is no relation between there is no relation that I develop this application in Windows. I can only host this application in Windows operating system. There is no such provision. You can develop any platform. You can host in any platform.
If I develop application in Linux means, then I will be using out of process, right? And if I deploy in
why you are talking about if you are developing the application in Linux, then you need to use out of process hosting model. Hosting model means while you are hosting the application into the server.
In Linux also we can use InProcess and we can run the application.
If you are developing the application, then development server is there, right? Where you can use to develop to test the application. But when you are hosting, where you are going to host, you are developing the application is Linux is a different thing than hosting the application is in Linux is a different thing. So what exactly you want to do? Where you want to develop and where you want to host?
If I want to develop in Linux and if I want to host in Windows application, then this hosting model in Linux, it will be out of process, and in Windows, I can change to in process, right? Or it will be out of process.
You are actually making me confused. Let me clear. So where you want to develop the .NET Core application?
I want to develop in Linux system.
Linux, right? And where you want to host?
In Windows.
Windows. So if you are going for Windows, then you will find IIS.
Yes.
So you can use IIS only, no? Or where you can use IIS means you have option. You can go with InProcess hosting, na?
Okay. In development, I need to go with OutProcess only.
So development means there is while you are developing, it doesn't make any sense whether you use InProcess or out of a process, right? It doesn't matter if you use InProcess or out of process. Why? Because the development settings, whatever we specified in the launch setting.json file, these are never going to be used in the production, right? In the production, how you are hosting the application, that matters. Right? If you are hosting the application using Windows, then that is going to be your, what I can say, InProcess. If you are hosting in Linux and Mac, then in that case, it is going to be out of process.
Okay. If in Windows also I use OutOfProcess means, then custom web server will come into the picture.
In Windows, out of process will not come into the picture. For the development page, I have shown you this thing. But for hosting point of view, it is always going to be in process. He can only able to handle the request, and in that the server is no more required. You just tell me why out of process is required in Windows. It's not required
I
at all.
just am asking the question, if I change to OutOfProcess means whether it will work.
You know, you just tell me if you know that Windows can alone provide the security and execute the application. Is there any need for a custom server in Windows? Just ask this question yourself.
No, there is no need.
But why they have provided this flexibility? Because if we want to get a flavor, how exactly the auto process is going to be work, for that purpose, they are allowing you to host the application using IIS as the external and run the application using the custom web server to get a flavor how exactly this is happening. But in real time, whenever you host the application in Windows, you need to go with the InProcess only. And if you are hosting your application on Mac and Linux, you have only the option out of process.
Okay,
because here InProcess will not work. InProcess means it is only IIS, right? InProcess means it is only IIS, or what I can say, IIS. InProcess means you need to understand IIS.
If we have like the Apache server installed in Windows, right? So what will be the process there? It is in process or
in this case, I'm talking InProcess means I'm saying Windows or IIS first. Let me clear. InProcess means Windows or IIS.
So see, it's not necessary to be IIS always, right? So we can have Apache or Nginx installed in.
No, I'm not talking about what server. I'm saying whenever I'm saying the term InProcess means IIS only.
Okay, got it.
Got it? It doesn't matter in Windows whether you host the application using Apache. If you are using Apache, then it is going to be out of process. If you are using IIS, it is going to be in process. Right? But if you are using Linux and Mac, you do not have the flexibility to use IIS. So in that case, you need to go with some other servers like Apache, right? And in that case, Apache alone can't handle the request. So in that case, what will come into the picture? Custom.
Out of process means other servers, right, sir? Operating systems.
Other than IIS. In process means IIS.
Yeah. So out of process, I'm talking about.
Yeah, out of process means other than IIS, no? It can be Apache, it can be an Nginx, it can be any other processor server, right?
Okay.
Okay, that's it for today, guys. Any question from anyone? And guys, don't do any such kind of a drawing. Even I don't know how to remove these things.
The left side one pen mark is there, right? From there, eraser is there. Can we remove it?
That annoyed.
Yeah, no, it is. Can you click in
Where,
the
where
edit?
is that? Eraser.
Eraser will be there, right?
Yeah, but see, don't do these things, right? I'm explaining means whatever things that need to be done, that should be done by me only, not by you, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so with this, our process different hosting model concept is completed. Tomorrow I'm going to start discussing that launch settings, start JSON file, app settings, middleware component, the request processing pipeline, and many. Right? Thank you.
Pranay, one question. Normally in .NET applications, we will have configurations, right? Like to make it as SEO friendly URL. Whether in .NET Core also we have that feature.
Definitely. So in .NET, how you in .NET framework, how you are making SEO friendly URL? You just tell me. By using what concept?